So you have a tender rate and you love overlanding. You have plans to do it big on the trace and some super glamping. One ideas, deep news and reviews, a podcast the first rate and here just for you. You don't have to think about it, join us and be about it. Something interesting we want to hear about it, come on let's talk about it. Welcome to Waypoint Overland's Random Waypoints podcast.
Sponsored by MIDLAND, communication for every adventure. The industry leader in radio communication technology and innovation for over 50 years. Sponsored by MYMEDIC. Sponsored by TEMBO TUSK. Sponsored by Shower Pouch. Sponsored by DMOS Collective, mission built and made for mobility. Sponsored by BrewTrek. Sponsored by Hard Impact Designs.
Always remember, the opinion you follow should be your own. Just consider the things stated here to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online.
I had a weird dialogue with somebody.
Okay.
They're planning on taking a trip to Ouray, Colorado, right?
Okay.
And they were asking me about it, about getting there, just getting there. And
Yeah.
they said, once they got there, they were going to take some trails. But their questions were like logistics questions. They were like, well, I know Ouray is a very remote place. Do you think we should pack food? And they were asking like fuel questions, like they were going to have to go some great distance before they'd get fuel and everything. And it made me think, I was like, wow, they're talking about a time about maybe 50 plus years ago.
Yeah, at least. At least, because I'm like, it's a town and it's on a main route. So no.
Right. And like Ridgeway, the city right outside of it is you can be in a nice city. You can get McDonald's 10 minutes away.
Yeah.
But
Sure.
it just, I always pay attention to things like that because I'm very wary of, or I'm very cognizant of my time left on the earth and how things change, and those dreams and romantic ideas that you have, they might not be there when you decide to go. Because
No, I mean, it's one constant, right? Is change. So you can expect that everything changes. It's just the way it is.
yeah, because Ouray it's not close to remote.
No. Not even close. No. Nothing. In fact, it's funny. I'm a little confused by you even telling me this because it's like it's not. I don't picture. It's not remote at all.
Well, once upon a time, the $1 million highway drove through there. But like I'm saying, that's at least 50 years, if not more, maybe more like 60, 70 years ago.
Right.
But until people go to these places, a lot of times, like people still have ideas of Yellowstone, that don't exist. They have that idea. You remember when you were a kid and they showed you Yogi the Bear and all of that type stuff?
Well, yeah, but those are times from probably the 30s and 40s, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you were seeing pictures back in the day before infrastructure of parks, and it was before the interstate highway system, really. I mean, I think is what, that's changed a lot of things, certainly. And, over time, popular places get developed and popular places have to put in infrastructure to be able to handle the increased visitors, whether that means, roads or bridges or parking or, all of the above. And, and then that goes to utilities, right? So cellular coverage and electricity and plumbing facilities and better bathrooms and et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot that goes into that. And that's just sort of a natural progression. So what are you going to do, right?
I think that the era that you just were discussing, where we started building the infrastructure and having interstates and all of that, that also coincided with the end of a war, where we had a lot of gentlemen who had come back, who had overseas experiences. They,
yeah.
So I think that was a turning point. If now that in retrospect, in travel and overlanding, nomadic life, people having it easier to get around, people being exposed from the war, being in other countries, wanting to go back. So I wonder how fast these things would have occurred without the war, without the, what was it, the new plan it was called or whatever to build?
Yeah. Think about it, you had a lot of people that were employed because war employs people. So you get the war comes to a conclusion, and now you've got to employ both the people that were stateside or back home that were producing things and the people that are coming back from fighting. So that is typically a time where you get great expansion of, the government gets involved, and as they did, and they, there was like you said, the big, I don't know what it was called, either the big plan or whatever, where you had a lot of construction. Because you can, I know when you go through like Yellowstone or even Glacier or Yosemite and some of those places, Grand Canyon's a good example of this too. A lot of those buildings and facilities were built at the same time frame, right? The lodges, the big famous lodges, they were kind of. I particularly think of the one that's in Yellowstone. And
that's
that one's
a
pretty
big, beautiful one.
It's beautiful. Yeah, and so are some of those. Those hotels that were in the Grand Canyon along the edge there. Those were built. I forget. I've stayed at one of them. I can't remember the name of it. But yeah, they were. I think it was built around the same time. And that's kind of go back to like, is that overlanding in America? Is that the origins of it when those first facilities popped up in our beautiful national parks, and those were the first travelers that would go in, what you and I would consider to be old vintage cars and whatnot. I know my dad, when he was a kid, did some traveling in a car like that, and then him and my mom drove cross country in an old Morgan. And a lot of people have never heard of a Morgan, but it's a British car. It actually has a wooden frame. And they drove all the way across the United States in a Morgan with their like suitcases strapped on that, like a roof rack on the back on the trunk thing. Mm-hmm. Cedar car, little sports car. And yeah. And in fact, I have pictures of them we're talking about it at the Grand Canyon. So.
Yeah.
That's where I get it. Because of the don't think I came from somewhere. I came from somewhere that my parents were into that.
So I want to run something past you that's on my mind. It's about the internal combustion engine versus the electric vehicle. And I'm coming at it in a little different way than probably what you're thinking. Companies like Ford, Chevy, GM, blah, blah, American companies that are known for decades throughout the history of America for internal combustion engines are now trying to transition into the electric vehicle market. Mm-hmm. They don't really have, even though these are big Fortune 100 companies, they don't have what I would call branding in the electric vehicle market. They're like starting all over again. I think people respect the name like Tesla far more than any of the other companies on the electric side of cars or vehicles. Would you agree with that?
Yep. Yeah. So, I mean, it's an interesting time because, like you said, every manufacturer out there, whether they're European, Japanese, or American, are producing electric cars at this point. some more famous than others. And like you said, Tesla or Rivian is another one. You know, and there's a whole list of other ones that are producing electric company. Essentially, let's use Tesla as an example. Tesla is just as famous, if not more famous, than Ford, as an example.
I agree.
You know, right? So it's changed the game a little bit because now a behemoth like Ford is just another player in the market.
Right. And in some people's eyes, not necessarily that particular brand, but some of the brands that have been around forever, as far as internal combustion, don't have stellar reputations. So transitioning to the electric vehicle doesn't necessarily make people feel anything positive about your brand, even though it's been around forever.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you get some of that on both sides, I suppose, because you've got startup. There's a lot of startup electric car companies as well that don't necessarily have good reputations. You know, I don't even. I'd mention names if I could remember what they are, but you know, I read articles and there's a lot. There's a lot of electric car companies out there. It's kind of surprising. So you got to understand there's politics involved here. And I don't know where you want to go with this, but there's a lot. Well, so let's just say you brought up the topic of internal combustion engines and how it relates with, you know, electric engines or electric vehicles now, and then the supposed transition between one to the other. So there's a lot that's going on behind the scenes here, right? There's the government, and I don't mean just the American government, a lot of governments, particularly mostly American, European, that are mandating changeovers or emissions control, I guess basically different steps, right? They're trying to get towards a world in which we don't have, you know, using fossil fuel.
Right.
But so there's that. And then there's also, so to make it a double whammy politically dynamic sort of thing going on, is that you've got, Tesla's a good example of this, that's trying to crack, if you will, the big automakers' grip on the multi-tiered selling system. So traditionally, you know, if it was a Ford, I could buy a Ford vehicle from a Ford dealer. Now, I didn't buy it from Ford, the company, and they couldn't sell it directly. And it was all put into place this way. And everybody played out that way. So even if you were Subaru or Honda or anybody else that came to America, that's the way it was. Well, now Tesla, and they're not the only one that stepped in, and they want to sell direct, right? So now we want to sell cars similarly to we would sell an Apple computer or anything else that, quite frankly, you buy on Amazon. So the big manufacturers are fighting that because you're taking the middleman out of play here, essentially. And they're like, in many states, they fought. Tesla's a good example of this. Many states, they fought and said it was illegal for Tesla to sell its own cars. So there's that going on. And then there's also this whole, I'm going to call it a misinformation campaign, if you will, as to what the quote benefits and negatives are for both electric and for combustion engine, right? So because there's a lot of information out there, and I know we're trying to stick to the Overland world here, and we're going to get to talking about that in a minute. But the deeper thing here is like, you know, the misinformation. I'm going to call it like. So one is led to believe, as an example, that electric is environmentally more friendly. Well, I would definitely consider that, in my opinion, to be a misinformation campaign, because that depends on what we're talking about. That, you know, there's a campaign going on about, you know, range and the ability and usage for what each vehicle is used for. And, you know, yeah, sure, electric is, you know, there's pluses and minuses to everything, right? And by the way, we're talking about consumer vehicles here by and large. So end user consumer vehicles where it's you and I buying a new car. We're not necessarily talking about, and by the way, in America is a good example of this, the vast majority of diesel fuel, the vast majority of fossil fuel that's burned in America, transportation wise, is commercial. It's not you and I doing it. I mean, how do you think your goods get around? Diesel by both train and by truck, and largely in the U.S. Unfortunately, it's mostly truck transport that moves everything around. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes here, I guess. But I'll let you bring us in. I think you want to talk about something in particular, or at least switch it over to an Overland conversation a little bit.
Ironically, I actually didn't. It's such a tangled web that, like, you were talking about the politics of it, but you can't talk about it without talking about the politics of it, because there seems to be a fight between the two technologies, internal combustion versus, but it has nothing to do in reality with which one is the better product. Nothing to do with it.
No, I mean, I think they both have good uses. They both have great uses.
Absolutely.
And I don't know that one is destined necessarily to replace the other. I'm having a tough time envisioning a world that does not use internal combustion engines for certain things. At some point, we may not be using either. We might be using nuclear or something else. But right today, and I would say for the imminent future, and right with the technology that we have today, I don't see. And a lot of people are acting as if the electric car is going to replace the gas engine, and I don't see that. I don't think it's possible.
Just even the battery portion. I know very little about the technology, but I know enough about the battery technology to know that basically all they're doing is taking little batteries and stuffing them in a bigger compartment.
Yeah. It's like when you take a Battle-Born or a lithium battery for your Overland vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason everybody's like, wow, this is great. It's double the power. It's lighter. There's tons of advantages to it. Totally true. But the reality is the way that they build those, and the good brands have a lot of circuitry involved with them, a computer circuitry to control the energy flow, both coming in and going out. Now they have ones that are heated, so they can regulate the temperature, so you can charge better and discharge better. But essentially, if you take your iPhone here, right, it has a lithium battery in it. You're basically taking a bunch of these batteries and daisy chaining them together to make a bigger battery. And then when you get to the Tesla size, I know somebody in the Overland world right now that's taking a Tesla batteries out of the car and using those as their habitat batteries for their Overland rig. So, I mean, because it's all the same, right? It doesn't make any difference. And I don't know. I don't remember if are they running at 48 volt. I'm not sure what they're running at, but it's just a bunch of batteries and daisy chained together.
So
little or battery.
There's really not been the battery technology has not really gotten better. I haven't seen any progress. I haven't seen any signs that tell me, hey, in the near future, maybe I should buy one of these vehicles because I'll get 500 miles of range and all the things that's wrong with it will have been solved. I don't see them being solved soon.
Well, it's funny. I was listening to a podcast the other day. I think it was Scott Brady was doing on, and somebody asked him, is a off-road quote Overland vehicle realistic to purchase that's electric? And I think his answer was pretty accurate that He had recently done, I think he was I forget which two vehicles he did. I don't quote me on this. I think one was the Rivian and I forget what the other one was. Anyways, they took it the longest, quote, I'll call it backcountry trail in the United States. And both of them were successfully able to navigate through that. And his answer was yes and no, kind of. And I'm paraphrasing. If he ever listens to this, maybe he can correct me. But I think what he was saying is that in America, certainly, you are within charging facility range, generally speaking, of most places if you're on a point A to point B drive. So meaning if you're going to do this backcountry discovery route with that vehicle and you're leaving from XYZ location in Arizona and it's going to Nevada somewhere, you're within the range of that vehicle. Now, if you were going to go off grid and camp with it for 3 weeks or 4 weeks, not the case, right? Because there's no recharge facility in between there. So, but outside of the United States, I mean, good luck with that. There's no charging facilities in 98% of the countries on planet Earth. So, and even in the US, they're very limited to mostly major metropolitan areas. So unless you're going from point A to point B, major metropolitan to major metropolitan, you're challenged, right? And so if I'm living in off-grid Montana, as an example, and I'm not necessarily going to a major metropolitan area that frequently, it becomes much more difficult, particularly like me, as an example, in, off-grid into Montana. I don't have any, where my land is, I don't have any power there. So how would you propose that I would charge my electric vehicle at that location? It would be pretty difficult and pretty power intensive on a solar or diesel generator. And then, of course, I just said diesel generator, right? So if I'm generating power at that latitude, the likelihood is that solar isn't going to do 100% for me. So it's probably some other kind of, and it's probably fossil fuel based power, realistically. As, by the way, is the same with your electric that comes to your house. Generally speaking, that's coming from fossil fuel.
Yes.
So, I mean, we can go on a tangent here and go, okay, well, that now we're starting to talk about, electric and the environment and how does this relate to, in comparison to fossil fuel. But I mean, at the point we're at today, I would, and I'm sure somebody will probably attack our podcast for me saying this, but I mean, largely speaking, most of your electric that you're going to charge your electric car with is coming from fossil fuel. So
that's just a fact.
It's a fact. Number one. So my problem, I'm just gonna lay out Mike's problem with electric. One, I don't buy into the environmentally friendly thing at all. I think that's a load of bullshit. I do. I just think it's bullshit. I'm not saying it's going to be forever bullshit, but it is today, because all of your charging, let's just call it, it's coming from gas in the ground that you're drilling, that you're piping, that you're refining. That's where your power is coming from, really. Two, unfortunately, today, most of the battery technology and those things is based on lithium, and lithium mining is extremely destructive and very environmentally non-friendly. So the batteries are a huge issue themselves, and that's just creating the battery. And then you have the problem with the battery going bad and disposing of the battery. So a landfill, a waste problem. And so you got battery problems on both sides, making them and getting rid of them. So those are my two biggest environmental. So when somebody says I want to buy an electric car to save the environment, I call bullshit. So if you want to buy an electric car for some other reason, I'm okay with that. And by the way, I'm not at all against electric vehicles. In fact, I think some of them are great. I happen to kind of like the Tesla. I've driven two of them. I've driven the X and the, what's the SUV? Is that the X? I've driven the SUV and the big state sedan. I can't remember which one is which or what.
I know what you're talking about. It's lightning fast.
Yeah. I mean, no gears, acceleration. I mean, your electric car will accelerate faster than you give me any gas powered thing and it's going to beat it, period. End of story. You could take a fairly inexpensive is a strong word, but you could take a fairly inexpensive electric vehicle. It'll blow the doors off a Ferrari.
Absolutely.
I mean, the way it is. So yeah, there's definitely things to like about it. You don't have to, there's a lot of maintenance things that you don't have to do. You're not doing oil changes. You're not, there's all sorts of stuff. There's savings. I know Tesla, we've talked about Tesla, they're working on a truck that, for the commercial industry where they're saying that you could save just all sorts of resources, maintenance over the road, obviously trucks it's almost like aircraft. They've got to be reconned every so often. And there's a lot of expense that goes into maintaining a vehicle that's going to go 3-4 million miles. Right. And an electric thing has the potential of doing that. Brake pads, stuff like that. You're not having to worry about because different system. So there's all sorts of stuff that is a positive. However, you're still not getting around to me where the energy's coming from, nor are you getting around, strip mining for lithium and child labor and the rest of the problems, because a lot of it comes from questionable areas of the world in the first place. So, and not to, I mean, why not have us attacked by everybody out there? So, people moaning and groaning about the pipeline in America, from Canada here, and the, environmental risk, and let's shoot down the pipeline and not allow this thing to get built. Yet they're okay with a strip mine in, Uganda somewhere. That's right. Okay.
I don't see that.
That's true. You don't see it because that's in Africa. That's not going through Minnesota.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and I hate to say it, but that's the reality. There's a double standard going on with a lot of this. So I just like to call it for what it is. Let's just be honest. Right. Like, let's just call it the way it is.
And the decision has been made. We're going electric whether we want to or not. So there's that. When major companies like Ford and GM start making a majority of their lineup electric vehicles, if you go on Ford's website right now, the majority of their vehicles are electric now.
The question for me is whether that's going to hold or not. I think it's going to kind of, but there's trends. So think about this. Yeah, if you looked, I agree. Today, most of them look to be electric. 5 years ago, or maybe 10 years ago, you would have had a bunch of cars, and a couple SUVs and a pickup truck. That went away. I mean, nobody buys a car. They literally abandoned. This is prior to electric. They pretty much abandoned cars, and rear wheel drive went away, and and sedans kind of went away, and vans largely went away in favor of everything had to be an SUV. So there's some change to the automotive industry just in general, right? What is so funny? Phil's laughing.
I'm about to reveal how old I am right now. Do you remember when having a station wagon was fly?
Absolutely. And if your back seat faced the opposite direction, it was even cooler.
Oh, you were a baller. Oh, you know how you really balled out? When you remember the wood paneling on the like the
wood paneling. That's the key. Got to have that.
Oh God.
So these are
now if you would
electric is a toy. It's not a toy. It's a trend to some extent. I don't think the technology we have today. Do I think it's going to go from gas to electric? Yes. Do I think it's going that way? Yes. Do I think it's going to transition the way that we're doing it right now? No. I don't. I do not see all the gasoline powered cars being replaced by all the electric cars with the current technology that we have today, with limited range and various charging options, because that's another problem we got. Look, we moan and groan about the iPhone and everything else about, once it got a lightning port and something else got a USB-C. I mean, now we got electric cars with how many different ports? I mean, we've just created the cell phone issue on a car level, kind of, right? So,
I agree.
And then it's at different speeds, right? So that, I don't even know what they're called, but there's different, each individual car has a different charging speed. Well, most of them can charge at different rates depending on what your system looks like. And people got to go through the it's not just buying the car. I mean, if you're really going to charge it effectively, you got to get the charging port installed in your house. And hopefully you're in a place that can handle that. So there's a lot that goes into all of this. It's a big transition, and we are talking about. So let's talk about Mike's other negative view on the electric thing. I know I sound like it's my turn today to be negative. It is unfairly targeting and it affecting people of lesser means and at lower income levels. And it's not just because it's electric, and it's not just because it's the price of electric. It's the fact that essentially by mandating stuff on a government level or just on a consumer level, when we all decide we're going to do something, it drags the people that are of less means along for the ride, quite literally. And in this place, the issue is generally these people weren't buying new cars in the first place, whether they were gas engined or not. So now the mandate is out there, let's switch to electric. Well, there is an old electric, right? You're not really buying a car that's 10 years old that's electric. So now they're being sort of pushed into having to purchase a new vehicle or very close to new vehicle that they cannot really afford.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an issue. Not to mention, you're also, the market sets that the amount that you got to pay to run this vehicle, whether it's electric or gas. And as you know, over the course of time, gas prices, fossil fuel go up and down. We've had them really low. We've had them pretty high. Right now, electric is a good example. This is pretty high. Cost of electricity is very high nationwide. So that's going to impact people of lesser means that much more too. So that's another negative that's being sort of not really talked about a whole lot, that people are getting pushed into purchasing something. Europe is at a leading edge of this. Europe is essentially, by their legislation, because I know I drive an older diesel vehicle, and in many places in Europe now that's been banned, right? Because they had over a bunch of years, they've had a tiered system where they're eliminating older vehicles. The plot essentially is to get older vehicles off the road, both from an environmental pollution standpoint, which that makes sense, but from a safety, from a technology, from everything. The drive is really being put into that. Now, I don't want to go conspiracy full on here, but governments have a lot of involvement in industry, and a lot of involvement in, certainly in this quote electric switchover industry as well, and modern emission standards and whatnot. All of this drives to a goal, right? So if I can no longer drive an old diesel truck, and quite frankly, if I can't even drive a 2-year-old gas engine anymore because it's been banned, you can't drive into Paris anymore with it, or whatever the reason is, it puts more and more pressure on going with whoever is setting the rules and pushing you towards what the mandate is. And I agree with you. I think the mandate has been very clearly put out there, which is why you started the conversation by saying Ford, GM, they're trying to switch into electric, is because they've been told basically by X year, you got to have 75% of your cars electric. Well, what do? If you want to stay a company, you got to figure it out.
I 100% agree.
Problem is that we're not quite ready.
And that's where I was headed, is we're not ready. And I'm seeing, you wanted me to bring it into the overlanding. I am now seeing so many electric vehicle aftermarket companies and actual vehicle companies. They are marketing toward the Overlander. Their commercials, their still photography, all insinuates go ahead, take this vehicle anywhere, and there's no mention of you probably won't be able to get back.
Well, I mean, hopefully you can. You know, I've seen that some. Oh, look, I mean, Tesla's trying.
I mean, if you're going one day and back, I'm talking about if you want to go on an extended trip, the way some of the pictures and videos I've seen, they're giving off the impression that you can just keep going and going.
Well, Phil, it's a lot like what I think you said in a different podcast that we were doing. If you want to sell a vehicle, and you're going to, design a test course in Moab, and, you're going to show up as a customer and ride that crazy trail and be, you get done with this thing, you go, wow, this truck is great. Well, as you and I both know, the course was designed probably specifically, was tested by professionals, and the vehicle was able to accomplish this in advance. It's like Land Rover for years. I mean, I was into Land Rovers. I mean, every dealership used to have a test course on the Land Rover dealer, right? And of course, I mean, they're not going to build something where the thing's not going to make it or tip over. So, I mean, it's all built into the thing. Very similar to the marketing today from Tesla, from Rivian, from GM, the Hummer, for various electric vehicles that are coming out. Of course, they're going to, hey, we just did, Patagonia from blah, 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 blah. I don't know how they did it. Maybe they had a truck with a big battery on it. I don't know. But I have seen that, and I've heard rumors of them putting out Overland editions where they have extra batteries and, all sorts of different stuff going on. The question is always going to come down to, for me, today, is range and the ability. So I'm not questioning the vehicle's ability to do trails necessarily, because quite honestly, some of the features of electric vehicles over traditional gas and diesel engines makes them pretty good for off-road. So there are elements to that I definitely like. And I think some of these vehicles are pretty darn capable. So I'm not even questioning that. I'm really stuck on two things. One is the range. And I know I keep saying that, but I'm thinking from a extended trip viewpoint and going and not having a limitation as to where you could go. It's like Starlink for me now. I can drive anywhere I want and have this Zoom call with you. Before Starlink, I had to, if I knew I was having a Zoom call with Phil, I had to think about where I was, right? I had to make sure I was in location. So I don't want, if I have to do that with an electric vehicle because of a charging station, to me, that's not being fully self-sufficient. So that's where I'm going with the range thing. And then two, can we just be honest? These things are all brand new. Like, I don't care whether you're talking about Tesla or GM or Ford. I mean, I'm never a huge fan of taking out the latest and greatest, newest thing and sticking it in the middle of Africa and then figuring out whether it works.
Oh, yeah. So, the way business is run now, beta testing is done on the first edition of a product. You're the beta tester.
Right. Yep. We've actually never started this vehicle yet, but now that you're here to buy it, let's see if it starts.
Right. Yeah, I have always made it a rule, even before electric cars, when a new vehicle comes out, I am not getting it the year it comes out. Mm-hmm. Secondly, usually all the things that you wanted on it, that you were compromising about, comes out the next year.
0.3. Yeah. Yep. You go, oh man, well, I love that new thing. I sure wish it had this. Well, guess what? Year two, it does. Or at least it's an option.
So I want to ask you about something. Now, Earth Cruiser, you're familiar with Earth Cruiser, I know, especially with what you drive. Yep. Well, in January, they announced the expansion into overlanding products specifically for electric vehicles. And that also included the official launch of their slide-in campers that were designed specifically for electric vehicles. And I thought that was the end of that. I thought that, they'd be done. But I sent you a picture today, and you've probably been wondering what the picture is all about. I sent you a picture of a Hummer. It's a teaser photo that GMC sent out because they are collaborating with Earth Cruiser, and Earth Cruiser
is it the Earth Cruiser or Earth Roamer? I just want to be clear. I'm not saying you're saying it wrong. I'm just asking. I can't remember. I put my glasses on to look at this.
Let me read it to you. GMC and Earth Cruiser Overland vehicles are teaming up to help shape the future of overlanding with focused product development and innovative technologies that will provide zero tailpipe emission solutions to the overlanding arena. Okay. So Earth Cruiser pretty much has like a reputation in the overlanding community. They've been there, done that as far as their rigs, their equipment has gone everywhere. And as far as the Hummer, not this particular Hummer, but in Hummer history, they have a history of been there, done that, and but we're referring to the military vehicle when I'm,
right. I laugh when you say Hummer because what a strange world this is, because really the Hummer was really a military vehicle, and then they kind of for a few years anyways brought it out to the consumer market, originally with the H1, and then they did the H2 and H3, which really were rebadged GM products, and then it went out of business, or they got rid of the brand. And I thought it got bought by somebody in China or a Chinese company, and I think they bought it back. And then they decide, let's take because remember when the H2 was out, it was the worst fuel efficient vehicle on the market, which is
it basically ruined the company. That was remember they went out of business for a while.
Yep. And so now let's use that same name and make it an electric vehicle that doesn't use any fuel. It's like, it just cracks me up every time I hear it, honestly.
Well, that was one of the things the article made me think about, is two companies that you have never heard the word economical or
fair enough. Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, exactly. Because if you look at Earth Cruiser as an example, just like my truck or Earth Roamer or Global Expedition vehicles or anybody building what I'm going to call large overland rigs, they've never been considered to be, leading edge technology in the environmental market, let's just say. And I'm not saying that's a true statement, but it's just, that's a perception, right? So you've taken that and let's combine it with Hummer, which, I mean, yeah, if you go back to really what I think when I think of that name, I'm thinking of, they used to run that ginormous diesel engine in those things, and it was beating its way across a desert. So funny, I guess.
So why do you think GMC and Earth Cruiser got together? Do you think they are a perfect match as far as actually coming up with something unique?
So you and I both had the opportunity to see the new Hummer. We saw it in person. Mm-hmm. I think that was a prototype, if I'm not mistaken, right? We
saw it more than once. One was a prototype,
and the second one was production.
Was drivable.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure it was drivable. Yep,
I think you're right. Well, remember a while ago, you're old enough to remember this. There was, I forget what brand and what it was, but I remember there was an LL Bean edition of a pickup truck, I think, similar to like
Ford had one.
Yeah.
They had the LL Bean Explorer.
Yeah, Explorer. That's right. Yep.
And it was some other company. Didn't your favorite brand, Land Rover, didn't they have a LL Bean? Like the seats were LL Bean or something?
Maybe. I don't try to remember if it was LL Bean or it was probably more, or it was, no, it was Barber. Barber, the British clothing company, I think.
Okay.
They had a Barber edition. Yeah. I mean, the point of the whole thing is, to me, I think that it makes some sense for GM to put Overland on a vehicle, right? So we've talked in past podcasts about the word Overland being sort of a trigger word for high end. It's an go-to word, right? You put Overland on anything and it costs more. So I can see GM trying to, and Earth Cruiser has a good reputation as well. So I think putting those words, Earth Cruiser, I mean, the name itself, you think of adventure, and then Overland. So if they have an Overland edition, I can see that. Is it a vehicle that's just? Is it going to be a cool mall crawler? Is it going to be real, or is this just more about a marketing thing to make something that's going to sell?
And that's why I asked the question, because I think this is more of like what I call the Schwarzenegger effect of branding. If you remember in the beginning with the Hummer was doing horrible when it first came out. I mean, they were not moving any. They were like moving no vehicles, and then Schwarzenegger bought two of them. Remember, and he was smoking a cigar, and then he started working with the company. Then all of a sudden, they were flying off the shelves, so to speak.
Yeah.
And it became it had a certain machismo about it.
Absolutely.
You were driving a Hummer, the one that Arnold Schwarzenegger drives, the one that, just like how the Jeep had that reputation, the one that's gone to war and stuff like that. And it costs money, so it was kind of like a baller's move to buy this vehicle. It was the ultimate machismo thing to buy this vehicle. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, I mean,
the marketing.
I remember in the beginning, the Hummer basically was when Arnold got it. I think he had that black one that was all nice and it was cool. But think about it. I mean, the price of that thing was so high compared to. I mean, we all know, like, it was a military truck. It was like, it's like, and I could take flack for this too. I mean, I've driven around over the years in so many Land Rovers and Defender-based things, which were basically military vehicles. They're like tractors. And then they, you put on a bunch of, add-ons to the thing, sell it for 10 times the price. And people are like, oh yeah, this thing's kind of a piece of garbage. Well, yeah. I mean, just because you put air conditioning in it and a nice steering wheel, this doesn't change. It's still a tractor. But I mean, that's just the reality. So, so the question is that Hummer even a good vehicle in the first place? I don't know. I mean, it's untested, I think, right? Who knows?
So what I'm saying about with the Schwarzenegger effect is, I would say that Earth Cruiser is in the same kind of boat.
Yeah.
It's looked at as like, if you're going to have like a home on wheels, this is one of the macho vehicles to get, and it has a big ticket price number similar to Hummer. So I think they needed each other. The Earth Cruiser didn't have too many options as to who that they could brand with that was an equivalent, and Hummer didn't have too many people that was an equivalent to them to brand with. So I think they needed each other more so than that they actually were like, oh, we're getting together because we're going to do some kind of great technological advanced creation or invent something. You know what I mean?
You wouldn't surprise me in the least if you told me that GM bought Global Earth Cruiser. I mean, I don't know.
I could see that.
Global X got bought out as an example and merged into Storyteller Overland van company. So, I mean, that consolidation in the Overland industry is real. Look at some of these rooftop tents and things that got gobbled up by Thule and Yakima and some of the big manufacturers. Dometic bought a bunch of little players. So it wouldn't surprise me in the least if you told me that GM just went in and bought a couple Overland truck builders. Maybe they did. I don't know. I haven't heard that, but who knows?
I could see that. It's happened before.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think
we don't know anything about it yet, really, right? We don't know what they're trying to do with
Well, they teased when they made the press release with the photo that I sent you. And that's a GMC Hummer pickup. So
Yep.
I'm thinking their initial first thing they're going to do is something as far as a camper on the pickup truck.
Yeah.
And additional technologies of some sort, make it more integrated.
Yeah.
Whereas it's not like just a cookie cutter type. It's specifically tailor-made for the Hummer.
Yeah. And they haven't said anything yet as to a date or anything yet, I don't think, right?
And that's again why I think this is more marketing than anything else. I've seen announcements like this before and then never heard anything else after.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
Sometimes these companies, they say, well, hey, let's put it out in the air and see the response. So I think it's going to be solely dependent on the response.
Yeah. Yep. Could be.
That's a small group of people. So they'll be able to grasp what the response is very quickly because there's not too many people buying $500,000 vehicles.
Right. For sure. Yeah. I agree with that.
Do you know anything about the camper tops that they were making for other vehicles? Because I think they have one for Rivian.
I don't know. The thing is that to me, all of this is a little fringe in a sense that it hasn't gone mainstream enough. And not to sound like I got my head in the sand, but it hasn't attracted enough attention for me to really look into all of it yet. And like I said, or certainly for what I'm doing, but I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen it. I just haven't really seen. I mean, I've seen the big manufacturers show up at Overland Expo with vehicles, and they're on the market. I know Rivian. I've seen them around now on the road. Hummer, I'm not even aware if it's been sold yet. I don't know. I haven't seen one on the road, but I
haven't seen one on the road either.
Also been down in Mexico, so good luck with that there. And it's not going to work. So and that begs another thing here. I mean, we're really talking about an American market and an American overland experience. I mean, as soon as I don't care what border you cross, including Canada, unless you're planning on staying in Montreal and Toronto and Vancouver, you're definitely not going to have the facilities. If you were to take an electric vehicle right now to, I don't know, you do the Alaska trip that you did last year as an example. I don't know. Can it be done? Maybe, but I don't know.
You can go to Alaska. You can visit the different cities that I visited, but you couldn't have done the trip I did because you would have been. The charging would have been like a ball and chain.
And that's my point. And so when I talk about range, I'm talking about the ball and chain. I'm not necessarily saying that you can't find a location, charge, bounce to the next location, and then, and maybe you could get up to Prudhoe Bay. I don't know. But
a place like Alaska, you would have to literally get out of the immersement of whatever situation you're in, leave and go to civilization, and then go all the way back. I mean,
right.
So we're talking about in some instances where gas is a charger in this instance is so far away that you'd go there and get it charged, But then when you go back to wherever you're going, you need to go back to go get it charged.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying, and that's the issue, and it would definitely control which route you would take, for sure. I'm even picturing like going up on the Canadian side up the Dempster Highway. So let's assume you could get to Eagle Plains, which is halfway on the Dempster up, heading towards say Inuvik, and you could charge there. If you could charge there, I mean, they don't have a Tesla port, or so you're going to plug in with your orange extension cord. I mean, quite literally. So I mean, and I don't know, most of these vehicles, I could be wrong, but I think that's a long charge. You
need to book a hotel.
Exactly. So, and then maybe from there you can get there to Inuvik, and then you can get to TUSK. But I mean, they don't even have a gas station. So I don't know. I mean, so the difference between a gas powered vehicle is that you can take extra cans, you can take extra fuel, and you can fairly easily, depending on the vehicle, add fuel capacity that's native on board anyway. So my buddy Kevin, as example, just got a Sprinter van. He's adding an extended range fuel tank onto the Sprinter van. And then, he'll carry a number of jerry cans with him as well. So he could probably get that Sprinter van to have a range of about 1,000 miles quite easily. Right. So my truck, as an example, a big Overland rig like this, you could put a 200-gallon tank on it. Let's say, I get close to 10 miles a gallon, but let's call it, like, let's say you get 5. You still have 1,000-mile plus range. Fairly easy. It's not very difficult, to put a new tank on, and then, go into the gas station, and you put the, your gas pump is going to run twice as long because it's a bigger tank, and that's the downside, but it's not that hard. I'm not yet ever heard of an expandable electric vehicle where, I want to make this thing so I can go 1,000-mile range. Well, to my knowledge, that does not exist.
And that also made me think about, since we're talking about the power and range of everything, back to the marketing, the way they're marketing it. Some of these vehicles, I'm not going to mention a particular brand name. I don't want to get sued. But in the way they market it is you can drive far out into the desert, camp for 2 or 3 days, and plug everything that you need to power into your vehicle. You're going to barely have enough power to get there and back. And you definitely won't have it if you start charging stuff into it.
Well, it's funny you say that, because my travels around the United States the last couple of years, I mean, electric vehicle car camping has become quite popular, because you go to a traditional campground, you plug the car in, you're accomplishing 2 things for the price of one. You're basically renting the campground for the night, you plug your vehicle in, you're charging your vehicle, and you're plugged in, just like an RV would be plugged in. So everything on board works. Hell, you could sit there in your truck all night and camp in it, and with the air conditioner on if it's hot. And that's just part of the way it is. So it is kind of cool. However, I mean, these are traditional style campgrounds where you have plugins.
Right.
I can't see being parked in the middle of the desert like everything else, including, say, my truck that has solar. There's a finite, no matter what you have, there's some kind of finite amount of power you have. So, even if I am parked in a desert and I'm generating all my power from solar, if I decided to turn everything on, run my microwave for half the day, make toast every 10 minutes, eventually I'm going to drain my batteries. It's just the way it works.
I agree, but you can turn on your engine and or something. With the electric vehicle, once the battery's gone, everything's gone.
That's the difference. And that defines what I mean by range. It isn't just, I'm not talking about 300 miles or 400 miles or it's power range. And how easy is it to expand, and how easy is it to find places, and how easy is it to, and the full like you said, the full calculation comes into play. It's the power that you're using. So it's not just driving in this case. It's what you're running on the vehicle while you're driving or parked.
Yeah.
Like you said, I can start my truck up. It's essentially a large diesel generator. So, I run down my batteries, I charge them. Eventually, I would run out of diesel. Absolutely. But it's going to take, my range is a lot longer than any electric vehicle that's out there.
Have you ever been making plans to go somewhere and then all of a sudden there was a war or some political upheaval? Or
yes, right now. Yes. That's what I've been living through the last 3 years.
So listen to my convoluted question. Do you start paying attention to the politics or war stuff about a country? How far in advance do you do it? Because let's say you're going overseas. Let's say you were going to the Ukraine this year. Well, if you waited to the last minute to start paying attention to what was going on, you may have invested thousands of dollars on this trip that you're not going to be able to get back.
Yep.
However, if you had been maybe 2 years out when you first initially made the plans to go there, kept up with what was going on politically, you may have said, no, maybe I need to go somewhere else, and we'll come back to that. So how far out do you start paying attention to politics when you travel?
Just by the nature.
Or do you?
Well, yeah, I do, largely because by the nature of what I've done in my past has almost always revolved around the politics of the region, right? Because I've extensively traveled in Africa, which, I hate to say it, in our lifetime has always been up in upheaval one way or another, in one place or another, changes on a daily basis. So I don't make a ton of plans because they do change fairly rapidly. And so I based my experience on developing country system. So I would say the same thing right now. I'm working on Central America, Central and South America. Well, same issues going on there. You've got some interesting things going on in Nicaragua again. You've got some things going on in Honduras, in Central America. Obviously, Venezuela is an issue. There's different things in South America. Quite frankly, we just came out of, everybody's experienced this, we came out of the COVID pandemic, and that may not have been a war, but it for all practical purposes, it was a war. It greatly reduced your ability to do things. So you got to look at that stuff. So if I had planned when I left, which I did, to drive around the world continuously starting 3 years ago, and I've so far gotten, basically to Mexico and back a few times. If I had booked my trip ahead and booked a ship, let's say I had booked a shipping arrangement already from Argentina to South Africa, as an example, which I had planned on doing, it wouldn't have happened. Or I would have been standing there with no ship in sight because they pulled the ships off the route, or it would have cost 10 times the amount because they've been like, sorry, we're not honoring your reservation because the price of everything went through the ceiling, or whatever the scenario could be. COVID, border closed, sorry, can't come in. All of that happened for real. So, I should I look at it very carefully. So technically, because I get asked this question, this is probably one of the questions I get asked a lot. Hey, Mike, it says on the side of your truck, you're doing this around the world trip. You're currently on it. You've been out for 3 years. You haven't gone around the world. So my answer continually is always like, A, it's not a race. I didn't set a time frame. I didn't specify necessarily that it was continuous. I had to drive on a daily basis, none of those things. But having said all of that, I will tell you truthfully, my original plan to drive around the world is 150% impossible right now. It is not a doable thing. So if for me to say that I was, as an American, to say that I could do it right now that COVID's over, because COVID caused the problem in the beginning, and then there was shipping issues because of that, and supply issues and whatnot, and that's still not straightened out, but it's gotten better. But so we've solved that. Well, we haven't solved the fact that there is no way that I could successfully navigate from Europe to Asia, as an example. It's not possible. You can't go through Russia and you can't go through Ukraine. That effectively shut down. Look at a map. I mean, you can't do it. There is no way. You can't go south. You can't go through Afghanistan. You can't go through Iran. So you're done. That route is closed.
The reason I asked you about this is in my research for the Pan American Highway, getting across the Darien Gap.
Yep.
I have had arrangements 4 times on how I'm going to get across the Darien Gap.
Yep.
And a business has gone out of business because he no longer had the connections needed for him to carry on his business. Another business was bought out by a business. And then, there's been different reasons.
Yeah.
But they all, when you get to the root reason, was politics.
Yep.
So that's what made me ask you about that.
The Darien Gap is a good example of this. So let's look at the Darien Gap for a second. So it divides, it's a very short stretch of land, really, in the scheme of things, that divides Panama and Colombia. And it's, dividing basically Central America and South America. And there's no road built there. I would predict that there'll never be a road across there, as Phil said, clearly for politics. There's many reasons, but politics being one of the largest ones. The American government, who effectively controls Panama, will never allow that to happen. The perceived quote smuggling route along a road. The Americans largely are worried about disease, mostly for livestock. So that effectively shuts transmission of diseases back and forth from South America. So those are the 2 political reasons, really. It's also very inhospitable. I don't know. There's like 38 species of like deadly poisonous snakes. I mean, it's a jungle. I mean, it's mostly water and swamp. You'd probably have to build a 30-mile bridge. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of challenges. So that is not going to go away anytime soon.
So go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to agree with you. I also had means of transport a bunch of times. There was a ferry company went out of business. Politics also meaning that Colombia and Panama are not super friendly together, and particularly there's warring factions mostly out of Colombia, rebels that are hiding out in the Darien Gap as well. Mm-hmm. So you've got some of that going on, but it is if you were planning on doing the Pan American Highway from Alaska to Tierra del Fuego, the Darien Gap is the biggest challenge on the route.
Dude, that's an understatement.
Yeah.
And I use that as an example because I just want people to not think that they can just casually make arrangements when they go overseas to different countries, especially if you're taking, if you're taking you're just flying a plane and you're staying in a hotel or whatever, but I'm talking about you're going on an overland trip with your rig or whatever, you better know, you need to constantly keep up with what's the environment like. I mean, politically, war-wise, and all, you need to know what's going on.
It takes one FARC rebel to shoot one guy on the Panamanian side for them to say, shut the border down. There's no, and you just lost your ticket on your transport. So, and that's what makes driving the Pan American so difficult. Is I would tell you that you really can't set up a transport across the Darien Gap until you get to Panama. until you're sitting on the ground there, ready to go. It's not something that you can book when you're in Boston and say, in 4 months from now, when I drive down there, I'll get there. It's going to be all set up and booked.
You better know somebody.
You better know somebody. Yeah. And that's probably the largest challenge, just in travel, particularly international overland travel in general. Is all political. It's borders. It's largely borders. For one reason or another, countries don't seem to get along and play nice sandbox, and that's really what it comes down to.
I agree. Do you think there's an advantage to going to a country right after a war? Like, let's say Russia and the Ukraine get this stuff together and there's peace. Is that a place that you would have a desire to go to immediately? Or is your strategy, no, let them get themselves back together?
From my experience, I would tell you, because I unfortunately have had a fair amount of experience in being in countries during and following wars, ranging from, Rwanda, Sudan, Ethiopia, Lebanon, Algeria. I can go on and on. Western Sahara. I've been to all of them. No, I would avoid things directly after a war because, or an ongoing conflict. The problem is that war generally does two things effectively. One, it takes out infrastructure, and you can see that in Ukraine right now. I mean, that's how you fight a war at this point in modern days. You take out technology, you take out their electricity, you take out the bridges. It makes life very difficult for obviously the people who live there, but also particularly if you're traveling through it, it makes your life even more difficult because you just don't know it well enough in the first place. So no, I would avoid it for that reason. And then the second thing that war does effectively is it puts everybody that's affected by it into usually economic devastation, which creates poverty, it creates crime, it creates a lot of things that also that may challenge you as a traveler. So, I mean, not that I don't want to say war creates good stuff too, but I mean, it does, it obviously boosts economies. I think America is benefiting from Ukraine enormously right now. Building all sorts of things. We're probably making missiles like they're going out of style, stuff like that. And it also economically, following a war, assuming that they have the support, I would imagine that if Russia was ever out of Ukraine, the international support would probably, there would be a lot of building, a lot of construction, a lot of money going in there, which is a positive. And it probably would end up maybe even better than it was before. Not suggesting that a war is a good idea, and it certainly the human toll on it would be just staggering. But no, I would avoid those places. I just think that it's not. So I traveled in some places that were really bad and really bad even when I was there, and I was much younger, and I would say that maybe a lot dumber, and we had a lot of struggles and challenges because of it. And I don't know that I would, and some of them I did it without vehicles too, or certainly without large vehicles like I have now, which makes it a little bit easier to stay under the radar and move around a bit easier. But you're going to drive in with let's say you drove in with a nice Jeep. It's certainly a possibility that the local rebel faction might just happen to need an extra Jeep.
Right.
True.
Right.
So there are challenges for sure. And definitely security challenges.
Do you research wildlife when you travel?
Yes.
'Cause I don't ever hear anybody talk about that. And I've never.
Now, which way are you talking about? I do it two ways. One,
like for me, If I'm going somewhere, I research what are the unique animals there that I won't see anywhere else. What are the predators? Will I encounter them? What I need to do all around. I'll watch Animal Kingdom. I'll watch documentaries. Part of it is just entertainment. I want to know about the different animals. Part of it is educating myself for safety. So I actually go kind of real deep into it.
I do the same thing. I particularly like animals. So I like, one of my reasons for traveling is to see them in different places and the different ones, depending on what region you're in. And like you, I would say you also want to know what the predators are, what you need to stay away from, what things you need to equip yourself with to be safe, where they are, what time of day they're out, et cetera, et cetera. Even like where I am in Mexico, it's like, when we're talking, many of the animals that are a threat to you as a person are not like what you think. I mean, they're cows and goats and stuff that are in the middle of the road when you come around the corner. So that I'm in a place that is a legitimate concern. Whereas, you probably don't have that concern necessarily if you're in, Rhode Island, but you definitely do in Mexico, particularly where I am.
A lot of people in their travels, it may not be the main reason they're traveling, but generally most people like to take pictures of animals along their journey, whether it's a deer crossing the trail or whatever it may be. I think that they should learn about wildlife because it will help you with your wildlife photography. And I'm not talking about you trying to be a pro. I'm just talking about the typical traveler. You'll get better animal photos. For instance, I remember posting some footage I took of some bears fighting on the road in the Grand Tetons. And then somebody commented, I go there all the time and I've never seen anything like this. I've seen a bear once. Well, my question was, do you know what times bears are up and out?
Right.
And they didn't know that.
Right. Well, and also, I'm not just be gross here, but recognizing their poop, you should kind of know the difference between a bear and a deer and a, whatever. So that way, because that's usually the best indication as to what's around, particularly if you're camping, when you see remains.
That can save your life. Imagine you on a trail and it's some scat on the ground and you don't know what it is and you keep walking. You don't know what grizzly bear scat looks like.
That's right. That's a problem. You go, that looks like a bunny rabbit.
or more realistically, they're like, a moose or something.
Yeah. No, so true. Yep. I mean, I think most of us as adventurers travel to for the people, for the animals, for the geographic scenery. Those are probably the top three things that most people go on an adventure for. To see. I mean, yes, there's many other reasons. Finding yourself and time off and whatever. I mean, there's lots of reasons for travel, but I think for visually, those are the three things probably.
I only asked about it because I've never heard that conversation ever about researching the animals. Mike, this is for me personally. What's your second favorite way of travel? What? No, wait. I've got a question before that. Is 4 wheels your favorite way of travel?
That's a loaded question. So we've said it a million times. I'll say it one more time. Overland travel is you controlling your travel. That's my definition right there. So it could be.
I'm not asking you that. I'm asking.
I know. No, I'm defining first.
Okay.
So it could be 4 wheels, it could be 2-wheel drive or 4-wheel drive, or 2 wheels on a motorcycle, or 2 wheels on a bike, or quite frankly, hiking the Appalachian Trail.
I'm thinking the basics like a train, a
Yeah,
bus, a boat.
yeah, I know. Yeah, so those are overlanding, not completely under your control, right? So other ways. Where I sit today, I would say my favorite is probably
Cruise ships.
no. It's probably what I'm doing. It's probably 4 wheels, driving myself, and it's interesting you brought up cruise ships. I'm one of those people that don't really like to be controlled. I don't like my itinerary to be controlled. So cruise ships are not my thing. All-inclusive resorts are not my thing, where, you can have, oh no, you can't have that rum, but you can drink that one because that's not part of the plan, So I don't like controlling stuff. I have a lot of experience doing non truck-based traveling, whether that's hiking and backpacking or just hitchhiking. I've done all of that.
My second favorite is trains. Haven't done it a lot, but I have taken some big time train rides and I enjoy them. It's a whole different thing.
Train rides are peaceful because you can relax. You're not in command of the vehicle. I haven't done any trains recently, but I've done trains around Europe, and I've done trains in Morocco, in Africa. I've done trains in East Africa.
Now, was it out of necessity, or you just wanted to do it?
In Europe, I just wanted to do it. The trains I took in Africa were mostly out of necessity, whereas I didn't have a vehicle with me. But I will admit, I've never done a train ride in North America. Well, I've taken Amtrak and, I've been on a train in America, but I've never taken what I'm going to call a train. I guess if you count going up Mount Washington in New Hampshire, I've done a train. The old cog rail.
A trolley? That's a ski lift.
Yeah. Pretty much. That's pretty much. But no, I've never actually done a train in North America. No, I take that back. I did. I took a train from Toronto, just outside of Toronto, up to Moosonee, up towards James Bay. And that was an overnighter, and we had our vehicles on it. So it was a train where you had sleeper cars, but our vehicles were loaded on there, because really we did it in the wintertime, and in the wintertime you really can't there is no other way of getting there. You have to take the train. And that was super cool. They had like a dining car. I think I have a video, up on my YouTube channel of us on that. But it's got like a dining car and had a little bar car. And then, you're going over some of these really cool like trestle bridges and stuff, and looking out at as Canada is, vast wilderness. You could see wildlife and stuff we'd see. So yeah, I totally forgot about that. So I did do North America as well.
I love trains. Like I said, I haven't ridden them as much as my love, but I do love trains. And it doesn't have to be like the Alaska Railroad or that famous Amtrak, where it goes from Seattle to Chicago. It can be just like, you'll go to certain little small towns or certain areas, and they'll have a locomotive that takes you on a scenic. I love them all. I love city public transportation trains. I'll get on a train in Chicago and take it from 95th Street, take it all the way to the other end of Chicago. I'll go in New York and I'll get on the subway and get on a train. I like all types of trains.
I guess if you count that, I've done a lot of subway in New York. Boy, I've traveled Montreal. God, I've been on
And
every.
you
I
may
think
have done this one, and
Montreal.
you may have done this and didn't even consider this. You want me to tell you what's a cool ride? DC to Boston
Yep.
on Amtrak.
I've not done it all the way to Boston, but I've done part of that ride. Yep. Amtrak. I've done Amtrak from Boston south to New York, and so I've done a lot of the Amtrak. Yeah. It's not far from where I grew up in Connecticut. Actually, Amtrak goes right through.
I recommend train travel with Amtrak. People kind of look at that as like ghetto travel, and it is kind of sort of. But some of the train stations that you'll end up in are historic and are beautiful. Like the one in New York, the one in DC, the one in Chicago.
If you ever get a chance, I don't know, maybe you've done this already, but I did a closed subway tour in New York City. So a lot of people don't know this. There's a fair amount of stations in New York City that are no longer open. It's historic ones, super cool. And I forget which, I can't remember. There's two of them in particular that we went down in that have been closed for many, many, many years. Beautiful old stations, just abandoned because they've expanded the subway over the years, and they dug it deeper and made it bigger. They needed bigger stations or whatever, and they're just abandoning them, but they're still there. So there's that's worth going to see.
I am very familiar with what you're talking about, and I have a story to tell you, but that has to be offline because
oh, you weren't supposed to be there, but that's okay.
I'm not saying nothing, but I'll tell you my story offline.
I'm not saying nothing either because I might have a story too. Might be the same story.
So what did you say your second favorite is? Is it the train?
Second favorite?
You said
motorcycle by far.
No,
I love riding a motorcycle. I would, if I wasn't such a wuss.
I didn't ask my question properly.
I would probably be a motorcycle overlander.
That's you driving. I'm talking about forgetting everything where it's you driving or you're pedaling. Like I said, a train, a bus, a boat, an airplane.
Yeah, I would say train. Yeah, if I'm not driving, train. Yeah, I would agree with you.
But I see what you're saying. I mean, if I'm going to be doing the driving, my next one is riding a bike. What do you think about electric bikes? I think now electric bikes have come along pretty well. They're not where they need to be, but they're further along than the cars.
Interesting you say that, because electric bikes range is for the I'll call it the power to weight ratio, or the size of the bike to the car, or whatever you want to call the ratio. The range on an electric bike is way longer than an electric car for the size of the battery. That's a fact.
I agree.
And by the way, I could see an electric bike. So I'll give you an example. On a battery and electric bike, about, so yay big. Probably about, I was riding one that was maybe 50 mile range.
Mm-hmm.
So if you figure it's a 50-mile range, it's not inconceivable that you could put a rack or panniers on it or something and carry extra batteries. You might be able to get that. You might be able to carry 2 extra batteries, as an example, and say you could get a 150-mile range on a bike.
Oh, bro, you need to Google some of these forums. You talking about putting in a pannier. There are people making brackets so that you can have 2 batteries hooked up.
I believe
there are people, the hubs, some of them have like power in the hubs. They're reconfiguring the hubs and changing the power wattage and all of that.
I've seen that.
One of the guys, when we were at the gathering, the guy who I left and went to another event with, Brooklyn born Vincent, he's deep into that type stuff.
Yeah, cool.
Well, is there anything else that you want to say?
Nope. I think we covered a lot as always, and typical for us, we meandered and weaved around, and
Here's the funny,
how we end up at the end, but we did.
Mike, we only talked about one thing that I had listed. And I was just asking you a question and we ended up doing the podcast.
Welcome to our world, folks.
All right, guys, you know what I'm going to say. Stay safe, tread lightly, and hopefully I'll see you here or on the trail soon.
You have been listening to Waypoint Overland's Random Waypoints. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more.